This week on Filthy Hope.
I think that it would have been different if we were playing like what I would consider Christian music, like praise and worship.
Sure.
Because then, in my mind, that is... You are then selling, in my opinion, you are selling Jesus in a way.
This podcast is a Uniting Heart and Soul production and was recorded on land that was stolen nearly 250 years ago. On this particular episode, we recorded on the land occupied by the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation. We pay our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and we acknowledge that sovereignty over these lands was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. At Filthy Hope, we humbly contribute to the ancient and ongoing traditions of storytelling when we share stories on this podcast. Hello and welcome back to Filthy Hope. It's your first time here. My name is Jonty, and on this podcast we are not afraid of spending some time in the grey spaces where faith, life and culture tend to intersect. My guest on this show this week has been incredibly generous with his time to come and talk to me. He's a film composer, a producer, and probably most well known for being the keyboard player and general onstage hype man for the incredible Underoath. Welcome to the show, Chris Dudley.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
I said off camera before we started, it's a thrill to have you. I've been a fan of Underoath for a long time, so I'm super keen to have a chat to you.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I've been playing in Underoath for a very long time, so it's nice to know.
That's good. I'm sure we'll get into some of the stories from all the way back in the day as well. But I mean, how are you today? I know it's relatively early in the day for you where you are.
Yeah, it is. It's 10 a.m. here. I actually just got home yesterday afternoon. We had a weekend of shows here in the States, and so I just flew out on Friday. Didn't get much sleep, and then got home yesterday, and then now, today is. It's funny because even though my job is music, I still look at it as like, a work day. So it's like, I'm working on a film right now, and like, I got my coffee, and, my work day, quote unquote, has started. So yeah, you catch me at a good time. I'm all caffeinated and showered and ready to roll.
Yeah, I love it. I'm the same with like, it doesn't matter when, if I've got like work, like 9 to 5 type work, or just more like the slightly loosey-goosey work. If I'm not showered, caffeinated, ready to go, dressed, like I don't feel like treating it like work, I feel like is so important.
I really agree. My wife, she always, and she doesn't actually give me hell about it, but because I always have to put my shoes on before I really do anything at home. Like if I'm trying to be productive, it's like I have to be dressed and I have to put my shoes on, because then I feel like I'm about to do something, and if I feel like if I don't have my shoes on and I'm just in my pajamas or whatever, I'm like, I'm not doing anything important. And I've tried to instill that in our kids, because we homeschool our kids, and I'm always like, in the morning, get up, take a shower, get dressed, and I think a lot of people recognized a similar thing over COVID, because a lot of people were having to work from home, and they're like, oh, I have to feel like I'm actually working. So, that's what works. What's what works for me. And, all of my work is technically at home because my studio is on our property. So I always try to treat it like a work day. That way I'm not just sitting here, just like zoning out, tired.
Yeah. I find as well, like where I'm recording is kind of my home office / studio. Until I had like that room that was separate from the rest of the house, I always found going to work at home really tricky, trying to separate the space. Like, I feel like having your own space to go to work is really so important.
Yeah. I always said, particularly over COVID, I felt a lot for people who were forced to work from home that didn't have a space to work from home, like people who are having to use like their kitchen table, and then their kids are running around and stuff like that. Because I feel like if I don't have a space it's just you can't really get in a gear. And I guess it's a little different when you're doing creative work, because you have to kind of like put yourself in a mind space. It's not like you're not just like, running down a list of spreadsheets, but for the first few years that we lived in the house that we're in now, my studio was one of our bedrooms. And it worked because it was a separate room, but I could only work at particular hours of the day because, the kids are sleeping and all of that. And then, even when I was working during the day, all the kids and my wife knew that, oh, he's just in that room. So like they could just open the door and come in, and I would be able to hear like my son, at the time, he's like, Dad, I'm done pooping, and like, that sort of thing. So now that I'm separate from the house, it's that whole, even though I'm only walking, a few feet to get to where the studio is, it's still, I'm going to work. And yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah. I don't know if this is true or not, but I read somewhere that George Martin, the guy that wrote the Song of Ice and Fire novels, got adapted into Game of Thrones. His wife was so sick of him not getting dressed in the morning to write that he bought the house across the road. And so to go to work to write, he just writes. He literally just walks across the road to the other house, and that's his writing space, which I think is hilarious. But just speaks to that, like you got to have your space.
And if you've seen that guy, he looks like the type of dude who would not get dressed in the morning to start working. He looks like he would go straight to the table and just pour a coffee and start. So
yeah, starts at like 3 p.m. or something and goes through till the dead of night. So
yeah,
you
if
just
I
got
had
back
the
from
money
tour.
to just buy the house next door, that would be cool. But yeah, I'm not rolling like that guy is.
Yeah, sell a book to HBO must be nice.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Yeah.
So you just said you got back from tour. Ghost Inside, right? Was the co-headliner? Was that the?
The last tour that we did, which was, I think we got back it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago from that. It was a co-headliner with the Ghost Inside. This thing that I just got back from was just 2 festival dates that we had over a weekend. But
right.
We did that tour with Ghost Inside, and also Better Lovers was on it, and We Came as Romans, and it was and The Word Alive was on the last few dates in California. It was awesome. It was so fun.
Yeah, sick. I've been talking to people who have no idea who Better Lovers are, and then when you explain like who that band is, oh my, that's sick. And like, I've just been trying to tell everyone about them because, I mean, I can't imagine watching them play every night. That must be amazing. But that EP just rips.
Yeah, it was great, honestly. And, for us, like, we've known, those guys for a really long time. So it was nice to, be able to hang out with, the dudes as friends, but then also to see them playing live music again. Greg has never stopped. I mean, he is always on the road, but those other dudes, obviously had some time off. But it was funny because even on the tour, we were, I would be talking to, people who were coming to the show during the day and, talking to them about the show. And I'm like, yeah, and Better Lovers. And they're like, yeah, I hadn't heard of them, but, we'll check them out. And then when I would explain that it was, basically Every Time I Die and Dillinger supergroup, they're like, oh man, I had no idea. And I'm like, and I've been like, before the tour, I was like screaming it from the rooftops, like, hey, like, you want to come see this band? Like, this is their first tour. And it was great. Those dudes are awesome. And it's overall, the tour was we had never met the Ghost Inside guys before the tour, except we met Chris once at a show after we had already booked the tour. And those guys became like, just within the first day, we were like, oh, those are our people. Like, we just really connected really, really quickly. And everyone on the tour was very, very cool. Like, a lot of times, you might have a weird guy here or there, or somebody who's not as cool or whatever. But I remember like a week into the tour, we were like, everybody is extremely cool and everybody's having a good time. And it felt great. It was a lot of fun. And considering how long the tour was, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got even just one person that for whatever reason is just that everyone, it's like that elephant in the room. And if you figure that out like early in a long tour, it can be a long few weeks, depending on what the tour is. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we'll normally wear them down. We'll make them fun by the end of it.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to talk to you about music, obviously. And on this podcast, we've been in the past, we've certainly done a bit of time talking to artists and sort of hearing, I guess, like the origin stories where people first find their love of whatever art is for them. And so I'm curious for you, take us back to, I don't know, maybe your earliest memories of discovering music, and was that at home? Was that through school? Was that through church? Like, I'm so curious to hear from people when music first became a part of their life.
Yeah, I think the origins of me recognizing, all of what music could be was really growing up at home. Like, we had a very wide range of music that was always being played in our house because, there was my mom, my dad, and my older brother, and they all had very different musical tastes. My brother is 9 years older than me, so, he was, way far ahead of me as far as, being able to get a tape player and, being able to find his own music. So, my mom, she was really into stuff like, Aretha Franklin and Heart and Creedence Clearwater, stuff like that. And then my dad was really into he liked a lot of like classic rock, like 38 Special. He liked Dire Straits a lot, Def Leppard, stuff like that. And then my brother was into at the time, 80s hip hop. The stuff that was mainstream at the time. He was into that. And then as he got older, he got into like Metallica and Nirvana. So I was kind of introduced to that stuff. So the thing is though, is I grew up in a really small town. So music was a thing that I enjoyed greatly, but the idea of playing in a band and doing music was very foreign because it's almost like growing up really anywhere in the country outside of like LA or New York. And when you go to the movies and you're like, oh, we're going to the movies. This is awesome. We're going to go have a great time. You go to the movies, you watch it, and then you go home. And that's basically it. The idea of being like, I'm going to be in the movies, it's like, that's just not even a thought. It's just like movies are a thing that other people make and other people do, and I enjoy them. And that's the way music was for me for the majority of my childhood, really until I got into high school. And then I realized that, I realized I liked playing guitar, and I became friends with other people who played music, and that was the impetus of me being like, oh, I can like do this as well. I wasn't great at the time, and I'm not great now, but I've been doing it a long time. And so the earliest memories, it was all just enjoying music and all different types. There wasn't music that was playing in my house that I didn't like, and it ran the gamut from like I said, Metallica to Aretha Franklin, and I liked all of it. So,
yeah, awesome. And you say guitar, was that the first instrument you picked up?
Yeah, yeah. I had told my mom that I wanted to learn how to play guitar, and she told me she would buy me an acoustic guitar to start. But I had no interest in playing acoustic guitar because I was listening to heavy music at the time. That was already after I had already kind of gotten into heavy music, and I was just like, I didn't know how to describe like distortion or gain or heavy guitars. I just knew that sound that's in those songs. I want to play that. And my mom was like, well, if you want to play guitar, I'll buy you an acoustic and you can learn on that, because acoustic guitar is a lot harder to get right. And she's like, you can learn on that, and then if you stick with that, I'll buy you an electric guitar. So I got an acoustic guitar. It was like it was like a mini acoustic guitar. It probably cost her like $15. And I started trying to learn heavy music riffs on this acoustic guitar, and I was literally just playing it long enough to where I would be able to get an electric guitar. And then she ended up buying me I had to contribute to it, but she bought me this Yamaha electric guitar and like this Fender combo amp that had a distortion button on it, which was a game changer for me. As soon as I hit that, and I was like, oh, there it is. And I was never really like a great guitar player. I was just barely passable. But that was the first instrument, because it was the only thing that I really thought I could play, because drums were too big, too loud, and too expensive. So I was like, that was a barrier to entry. And yeah.
And what then led to, because the next step that I want to get to is joining Underoath, and obviously in Underoath you're on the keyboard. So what was that transition from guitar to keyboard? When did that happen, and what did that sort of look like?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I was a freshman in high school. I took a guitar class because it was an elective, and I wanted to learn how to play guitar better. And the first day of the guitar class, I was just kind of like, that thing when you go to school and you're trying to figure out like, okay, well, who am I gonna click with? Who am I not? There was this other kid sitting on the other side of the room, and he had a shirt that I could tell was of a heavy music band. I didn't know if they were metal or hardcore or whatever, but I could tell by the look of the shirt that he liked heavy music, and I was like, I want to go hang out with that guy. So I went and sat next to him, and we kind of connected. And a few weeks into the class, we're hanging out, and he's like, I started a band, and I was like, oh, cool. And he had like a demo tape, like a handmade demo tape, and he was like, yeah, check it out. We're super heavy, blah blah blah, and it was Underoath, and I was I think I was 14 at the time, and it was not very good, but it was heavy, and I knew a guy who played in a band, so I was like, oh, we're hanging, and then through him, I became friends that year with Aaron, the drummer for Underoath, and the other guys who were in the band when I was in high school. And it wasn't long after that Dallas was the old Underoath singer. He was the kid that I sat next to in class. He was like, "Oh, I want to have keyboards in the band," and so he started playing keyboards and singing at the same time. And it was a couple months into that, I was just kind of always around. Like I just became friends with the dudes, and we would just hang out on weekends and stuff. And it got to a point where he was like, well, I'm either going to try to find a keyboard player, or we're just not going to have keyboards anymore, because I don't like playing keyboards and singing at the same time. It's silly. And I was like, all right. I hope you find somebody, because I'd never played keyboard before. And I think it was Corey, our old guitar player when I was in high school. He was like, well, Chris plays guitar, and he's always around, and we like hanging out with him, so why don't we just have him play keyboard? I mean, I'm sure he can figure it out. And so they asked me, because I think at that time they had 2 songs that had keyboard in it, and they were not hard to play. And they were like, hey, Dallas can show you these songs. Do you want to come and play keyboard in our band? And I was like, okay, sure. And at the time I was in high school, I was a sophomore, and I didn't recognize that this would be any sort of a commitment. I was just, my friends were playing in a band, and I'm like, yeah, I'll come play in your band. And that snowballed into me now being 40 and, just getting off tour with Underoath still. So, it's been a whirlwind since then, but that was really the start of it. I just kind of just fell into it from hanging out with friends in high school, and then sticking with it.
And I guess for listeners who may not be super familiar with Underoath. It was it pre Cries of the Past? Is that kind of the time? I mean,
Yeah. We did there was an album that Underoath did when I was in high school called Active Depression. It was like an EP, and I was there for all of that record. Like, that's how much I just was always around. Like, the band was in the studio for, I think that record was done in like it was like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah,
and I was in the studio for the whole time, and I screamed on one part because they were like, "Oh, we should get Chris to scream on this thing." And it was right after that came out that I joined the band. So yeah, it was so that was, I think I joined the end of 98, I believe, maybe beginning of 99. And then just kind of stuck with it.
And obviously sound wise and lineup wise, a fair bit changed in between. The next sort of thing I'd love to talk to you about is what happened to Underoath in about 2005, 2006. And maybe, again, just for listeners who may not be super familiar, from a fairly metal influenced sound, fairly underground, to They're Only Chasing Safety doing what it did, some would say, kind of contributing to defining that mid 2000s metalcore sound. Take me then to summer of 2006. You guys release a record called Define the Great Line.
Mm-hmm.
I'm super curious to hear from your perspective, coming from that background of friends in high school getting together to play music. How did it feel? And maybe explain for our listeners just the scale of what happened that summer for you guys. How did that feel to be at the center of that? And maybe how did that change the way that the band looked at the way that they were making music together? Because I imagine that will just completely shatter your view of your band's place in the world. Like, it's giant.
Yeah, I guess, to really get into that, I would kind of have to rewind 2 years when we put the record out before it, because everything up until the record before that was a record called They're Only Chasing Safety, and everything up until then we were just playing in a band. We were touring, but nobody was coming. It was we were not doing anything huge at the time. We were basically paying to go on tour. We we're kind of in this flux area where we were like, well, we're at the time we were young enough to where we could afford to do that. We didn't have to really come home with anything. We didn't really have any bills per se. And we released They're Only Chasing Safety the summer of 2004. And it was a real, we realized fairly quickly that record, because normally what happens is, you release an album, the first week it sells, whatever amount it's going to sell. And then it drops off from there. And then you figure out what your plateau is going to be, as far as sales go. And, that record came out, and it did at the high end of what we were hoping it would do. We were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, that's what we were, what we had dreamed one day we would be able to do. But then it just didn't really stop. Like, there wasn't like a drop off. It just kept selling like every single week. And over the next 8 months to a year, we realized that, that record was really doing something, and that we were coming home with money. Like, we were able to pay bills with music. And we realized probably right before we went into the studio to record to Define a Great Line, which was in 2000, I think the end of 2005, we realized that this was kind of sort of turning into our career. We hadn't really intended on that. Like, we had hoped, like, we were like, oh, if we could make money doing this, that's crazy, And then that record cycle, we saw that was happening. And then what's funny at the time is, They're Only Chasing Safety was we had realized, because before that we were touring with a bunch of really heavy bands. But we all just loved more melodic music with more singing, and we wanted, catchy hooks and all that, because we were just like, that's what we love. But at the time we were looking at it as, you were touring with all these heavy bands. The music that we've done up until now is super heavy. I wonder if there's a way that we can have this heavy music, but then also have some sort of a melodic element to it. But at the time it sounded weird to us, because we're like, how does that work? Like, how can you have this like screaming, but then we loved, like at the time, like Zayo and bands like that. But then we really loved like Jimmy Eat World. And we were like, is there a way that those things can come together? And, that we did They're Only Chasing Safety, and it did really well. And then, management and label and everybody is like, okay, lean into that melodic thing and, write more hooks, more choruses, things like that. And they're like, you're going to be the next whatever, like you guys are going to be huge. But at the time we were just like, we don't want that. Like, after touring on that record, we were like, we want something like darker. We want something heavier. So we recorded Define the Great Line. And I've told the story a couple times, but, I remember getting done with that record and having a conversation with our singer, Spencer. And I was like, I am so beyond proud of what we have done here. There's going to be a lot of pissed off 13-year-old girls, because this is not what, I don't think it was what people were expecting, because they kind of expected us to kind of go in a more melodic route. But that just wasn't what we wanted to do. I was like, we're going to have a lot of pissed off 13-year-olds, but whatever happens from this record, even if it flops, I can, just be proud of it. And we were on Warped Tour in 2006 when Define the Great Line came out, and we got word that Warped Tour is weird because every day you're just in a parking lot, it was weird. So you're kind of cut off from the outside world, and it was really pre-social media. Like, MySpace was a thing. But there wasn't like a Twitter, there wasn't like an Instagram, there wasn't this like real time view that we had of the outside world. Like, we were literally we would get calls from our label and our management and stuff, but we were just in this bubble of Warped Tour. So we saw that our shows were doing well and people were liking the songs, but that was really the extent of it. And then, we got word from our label. I remember we had a call with them, and they're like, so your record, it's poised to be in the top 5. And it may be close to number 1. And we were like, oh, of like Christian records or like of on our label? And they're like, no, just of music, like in the country. And we were like, wait, what? Like after that first week, we had landed right at number 2, under, I think, like the Dixie Chicks or something like that. And that was I don't even think at the time we realized what was happening, like it still to us felt like, well, we're just doing the thing that we do, like we're just writing the music we want to write, and we're going on tour and we're playing shows like that. Because for us, the shows were amazing, but it wasn't like, it wasn't anything that, that seemed bigger than Warped Tour. We were just like, oh, we are seeing that we're having like for us at the time, the biggest shows on the tour, and people are really enjoying them. But it wasn't, I think, really until hindsight that we were like, wow, like that was like a big deal, and yeah, it was crazy.
And you mentioned as well, it sort of brought up this idea of Underoath almost, well, not directly, but the world of Christian music being kind of linked to where Underoath was at the time as well. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective at that point in your career and in Underoath's career, how you saw Underoath as band interacting with the Christian music world. Because here in Australia, and I'm 25, so I was in primary school when at this point in time, but I don't think people my age in my kind of church music spheres quite understand how giant the Christian music industry was and still is. So I'm curious, for you, when you think of Underoath at that time and the Christian music industry, what was the interaction there? What was the interface between those two worlds?
I mean, for us, in a lot of ways, there really wasn't one. Because we had always, up until that point, we had identified as a Christian band. But we didn't play churches. There was like one or two like Christian music fests that we would play, but other than that, we were touring with, other bands who were playing, clubs, arenas, whatever. And we always just kind of stuck out in that way because we weren't, there was, looking back on it, there was a market for Christian music, but we were never like marketing ourselves as that. We were just like, well, we're just being honest about who we are, as people and why we do what we do. And what our music is pointing toward, because we're all, at that time we were kind of starting to drift individually, as from the time being in high school and all having this one direction and us all believing the same thing and all being aligned in everything that we believe. We were kind of starting to drift in that way, but we kind of still were identifying as a Christian band at that point. But it wasn't a thing where we were having these meetings with Christian, whether it's leaders or anything like that. It was just, hey, this is just who we are. And in years since, it's been looked at, not necessarily our band, but like, there was a big Christian music market around that time. And, I think even today, but I guess just inwardly, we didn't really see ourselves as a big part of that because we didn't view what we were doing we didn't view being a Christian band as necessarily something that was going to help us. Because I guess historically we had toured with not really Christian bands. So, not exclusively, but we always looked at it as us kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. Like being on Warped Tour as a Christian band at that time was like weird. And, we were touring with like, Throwdown and 18 Visions and, all these, very non-Christian bands. So I guess for us, it wasn't really, we didn't view it as much of a thing.
I find that really interesting and I love that in a like I can only imagine with the number, like the sales in that with Define the Great Line, there must have been people knocking on the front door of Camp Underoath and maybe not, this I could be making this up, but in terms of there's this market, we want to scoop you up and turn you into the next big giant Christian thing, whatever that, and I have all these icky feelings about marketing Christianity to sell tickets and CDs and stuff. Yeah, well, so I mean, I'd love to hear from you, like what, as a Christian, how you manage that interaction between art and faith, and then the commerce of it and the money of selling, really selling art is at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, it is complicated. I think for us though, it was a lot less complicated because we didn't view ourselves as playing Christian music. We viewed ourselves as, hey, we are these guys in this band and we all happen to believe the same thing, and we are kind of a unified front in that aspect. But our lyrics were very, very dark at times, and they've always been very personal to Aaron and Spencer. Like whatever they're going through at the time, no matter how dark or weird it is, like that's what they're writing about. So I think that it would have been different if we were playing like what I would consider Christian music, like praise and worship.
Sure.
Because then in my mind, you are then selling, in my opinion, you are selling Jesus in a way, where we were more so like, hey, we're not pretending to be anything other than what we are. We are writing about our personal stuff. We are, but we all do believe in Jesus, and that's where we're at. Take that or leave it. We're going to play our music and we're going to bang our heads either way. Thanks for having us. That sort of thing. So yeah, it is a weird spot to be in, and we had gotten some flack, from people before, that kind of viewed us as, hey, like you are, using this market to, to make money and all this stuff. And all I can say is just from our perspective, we were just like, hey, this is who we are. And we're playing the music that we're playing. We weren't trying to book a church tour and, make that money. And to be honest, like that was a thing. Like we knew that there were shows, there were places that we could go that would pay us a lot of money because they were churches or Christian organizations. And, that wasn't really the direction that we wanted to go. We just wanted to play in front of, people. And there are so many things over the years that, creatively and otherwise that we did. And, I think probably still do that are, if you were a person who was running a business trying to make the most money possible, we would kind of do the opposite of whatever the thing was that would make a business successful, going back to going from They're Only Chasing Safety to Define the Great Line. Like it was pretty blatant, like, hey, I think we recognize that if we go in a particular direction with the music, if we go a little more melodic, more choruses, things like that we would have like probably been bigger, but that wasn't what we were feeling. So we just didn't do that. And there are so many things that we do and have done where it's just like, yeah, that just doesn't feel right. Like, cause at the end of the day, we're the ones who have to, stand on stage and, get behind the thing that we're doing. And we're just not the type of people who can like, just fake it, and, I think that kind of led into, right around 2010, 2011. That's why we stopped, identifying as a Christian band, because we recognized that like, some of us, would still consider ourselves Christian. There were other dudes by that point that were like, yeah, like, I don't think I really do. Like, I don't know what I believe, but like, for all of us to kind of stand on stage and still say that we are all in the same page was just, it got to a point where it was not true. And then at that point we were like, all right, then we're not going to do that, because we can't in good conscience, talk about, being honest and, being so raw with our lyrics, but then just lie, So, yeah.
Yeah. In my brain that these two things feel connected on the one hand, the chasing safety to define the great line, that progression. I think I remember hearing Aaron say on a podcast at some point that like, if you guys had done Chasing Safety 2, you would have been the biggest band in the world for about 5 minutes. And then, and then petered out. And that as an idea compared to what you're just speaking to there in terms of as a group going, we can't stand behind this thing in and say that we're telling the truth. So we're actually just going to follow what we think is the truest representation of who we are today, as opposed to, I don't know, I often feel with art and creativity, the struggle to not just provide people with what they are expecting because of who they think you should be, as opposed to the purity of creativity and just going, here's who I am, here's how I'm feeling, here's a thing that I've made, take it or leave it. And I think for me, following Underoath over the years, that's been one of the things that I've really, really valued in watching you guys progress, is every time you do anything, you know that it's just, here's who we are, here's how we're feeling. And each time that's probably different, which is so exciting as well, because you never know.
It is different, because like there's, even if you look at it just as far as the music goes, you have the difference between They're Only Chasing Safety and Define the Great Line. And then, when we put the record out after Define the Great Line, I feel like with Define the Great Line, we had found at that time what we really wanted to do. And we were like, we just want to push that a little further. And that was what that record ended up being. And then, as the records have gone on, like we did an album, because we had broken up for a bit. And then we did an album in 2018 called Erase Me. And at that time, we were very much just like, yeah, like we love like rock music, and we want to do more of that. And, there with every record we've put out, that one included, there's people who are just like, oh, that's not what I want. Like I want, if it's either, when we did a record called Disambiguation before that, and a lot of people are just like, it's too heavy. It's, there's no, where's the hooks, like all that stuff. And then when we did Erase Me, it was like, it's like, oh, it's just, it's rock. Like, where's the heavy stuff? And then, and then we just did our last album's called Voyeurist, and in my opinion, it's very I think maybe because we didn't work with a producer at all and we did the whole thing ourselves, it feels just very raw and us. But all that to say, like, we're always just gonna do the thing that we like, and people may like it, people may not. And it always honestly kind of feels like you're just, when we get a record done, we're just like, we love this thing and we're crossing our fingers. Hopefully people like it. But if they don't, again, for me, it goes back to that conversation I had with Spencer and after They're Only Chasing Safety, and we did Define the Great Line. I'm just like, I'm proud of this thing, and there's going to be people who don't like it. And I just, if they don't, maybe they'll come back for the next one, and who knows? But I think that's the best thing that we can do,
for sure. And for me, you mentioned the album Lost in the Sound of Separation, which is probably my personal favorite Underoath record.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's fantastic. I could talk all day about it, but I won't. For me, I think one of the reasons why that record is really important, amongst a few others for this reason, is as a young kid growing up, discovering music that you could, from that kind of childlike perspective of, oh, I'm a Christian, so I shouldn't, like, your parents might have things that they do or don't want you to listen to, or whatever, and all of a sudden you can go, that childlike 10-year-old version of you can go, look, mum, it's a Christian band, quote unquote, whatever that means, but there's heavy music and there's screaming and all, like, the riffs and stuff. For me, that record was really important because it marked a point in my tastes where it was, I can interact with art that hasn't had the edges sanded off, and is a real representation of it's true, whatever that means. It's art that is expressed from a real point of just expressing the thing for what it is without sanding off the edges and making it polished, which has been probably a defining characteristic of my taste in music, especially as a person of faith, kind of going, whether or not the people that make the music are Christian, this music resonates with me deeply because it touches things that are real. And so I'm curious for you, maybe whether it's a record or film or books or whatever it might be, were there moments for you that were formative in terms of discovering pieces of art that informed how you approach not just taking in art, but creating it in that way?
Interesting. I think that if I go back to, even the earliest music that I listened to, when I was talking earlier about, Aretha Franklin and Creedence Clearwater, stuff like that, that my mom was into, I think that I subconsciously recognized that there was a difference between that and when I bought Vanilla Ice's tape and I listened to that. I was like, I enjoyed Vanilla Ice as a young child, and I was like, oh, this is fun. But then when I would listen to Creedence Clearwater, I'm like, even granted, the music is way different, but I could recognize there was a different thing there. And then I think for me, I had always kind of been, if I'm fast forwarding to like, when I really came into my, at the time, artistic taste, like late middle school, early high school, I was drawn toward anything that felt raw. I was into, I started to get into heavy music. I really liked, Napalm Death and Fear Factory, Earth Crisis, stuff like that. And then I was also I started getting really into horror movies, and it was a very similar thing. I would watch these, late 70s to late 80s horror movies, and they were, most of them were pretty low budget, and they were, a lot of them were campy, but there was just something about it that felt like gritty and it just felt raw. And I realized later on that kind of permeated my music taste and my art taste in general. I've always been super into like, pop music and stuff like that. I love a good summer blockbuster as much as the next guy, but there's just something else that there's another gear that gets kicked in when I hear something or I watch something, and it's just like, for lack of a better phrase, it just gives me that stank face of just like, ooh, like that's awesome. Whether it's a shot in a film or a riff or a vocal take of some sort, where even, what's funny is my daughter, my oldest, she's 14, and she really likes Olivia Rodrigo. And there's this song that she has that it's just a straightforward pop song. It's called Driver's License. But when I listen to it, I'm just like, that just feels like it's a teenager writing it, and it's teenage topics and teenage feelings, but I know that those feelings are so there. And it does the same thing to me that, watching The Exorcist did when I was younger, or totally random, but there's this new band called Johnny Booth that that I just discovered, and it's a very similar thing there, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I believe it, and I think the believing it thing is what is paramount. Again, whether it's, I feel like you can tell when something is created as a product to be sold, as opposed to a vision that just has to come out. I feel like you can see that in film, you can hear it in music. I don't like speaking negative about any sort of art, but there are particular types of movies that I'll go and see, and I'm just like, okay, you're attempting to check all the boxes to make as many people happy as possible. And you're doing it, and I enjoy it, but I see what this is. It's a product. Same thing with music. There's music that I listen to and I'm like, it's not even necessarily pop music, but there's music where I'm like, I see what you're doing. It's enjoyable, but it's a product. And then there's other stuff that's like, movies, like I remember the first time I saw Hereditary where I was just like, good Lord, like, this is just that. It just feels, like that it's a real thing, and like I just saw Talk to Me, a very similar feeling where I'm like, I
was going to ask you about Talk to Me,
and like but I can't even put my finger on it, but I know that it's real. I know that the people who wrote it, I know that the people who directed it, the DP, the actors, everybody was like, it. I believe it, and I think that is over my life. I think that has been the through line to the stuff that really connects is like, oh, I believe what you are doing there.
For sure. And just on Talk to Me as well, I had this experience watching that. I've seen it a few times now, but not only is it so authentically Australian, which resonated as soon as it started, I was like, I understand exactly where this is taking place. Like the sense of setting was just, but also the lead actress went to school with a close friend of mine, and I recognized the directors from YouTube back in the day. And as soon as that movie starts, it's this tracking shot through a house party. And I was like, I've been to 50 of these house parties. This resonates as so true. And it's the same, you mentioned Hereditary, that it is rooted in such a deep germ of reality that you can throw all the exploitation and genre icing on top of it that you want. But
yeah, and I think that the realness, like if you want to compare those films, it's like, Hereditary felt extremely real in the way that it dealt with grief and all that, and the family dynamic, and that, the argument at the dinner table and all that stuff, aside from the horror aspects of it, that just felt extremely real. And then on the other end, you have Talk to Me, where the interactions of the characters and the way that they talk to each other, and, you could just tell that, oh, this, these words are coming from conversations that have been had by whoever wrote this 100 times, and that first scene when there's that tracking shot through the house, and then no spoilers, but the way that scene ends, immediately I was like, okay, like that's all right, now we're doing it, because it's so startling that. And it's so real. Like it's not done in like a horror movie way. It's just, oh, this is a thing that happened, and I thought it was great.
Yeah. And that movie comes from, I don't know if you heard this story, but one of the writer directors was talking about a memory that he had being at a house party in high school, and thankfully the kid survived, but overdosed, and everyone stood around filming and laughing. And for him, that was the thing that stuck with him, and 10, 15 years later became this film that he wrote and co-directed with his brother. It just, again, speaks to, it comes from that deep, instantly recognizable thing of this is real.
And also, I don't want to give anything away, but the way that the characters, there's a montage sequence, I'll say. Yeah. You know what montage sequence I'm speaking of.
I do.
The characters in the film are, I guess I would say, just a different generation than what I grew up in. But during that montage sequence, I was like, I've never seen this subject dealt with in this manner. Like the tone of it and everything that's going on. But at the same time, I was like, I could see this happening now. I could see these people reacting in this way. And even though it's not how I would react during this thing that's happening, I could see a video being posted online of it happening and me being like, what the heck are these kids doing? Like, are they crazy? And that, I think, is why, even though I can't relate to it, it still feels real, because I'm like, I could see this happening, and I think that's so, I think on paper, it sounds crazy, but the way they were able to pull it off, I believed it immediately. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just admiring your collection of masks. For people that are watching that, they'll be able to see in the background.
Oh, thanks.
Up on your
I have more, but I don't have a ton of shelf space. But yeah, I like masks a lot. I've got a couple, like when if there's a movie that I work on that has a mask in it, I always try to sweet talk the director into giving it to me. So there's a couple up there that were from movies that I worked on, and then there's this one right here is a remake of the 2003 Texas Chainsaw film when he takes the boyfriend's face off. That's a remake of that, and then this is it's a Jeepers Creepers mask, and then a couple different ones. I nerd out on that stuff. I like it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And tell me about that transition and maybe where this started for you into the world of scores and working in film. I'm so curious because for me, that's something I've always wanted to it's one of the many things that has been on my bucket list of I'd love to work in film, whether it's in script writing or in scoring. So for you, how did that start and what was that pathway like?
Yeah, I was, in the same spot, but I viewed scoring films a lot of the way that I viewed being in a band when I was growing up. I was like, oh, well, that's other people do that. Like, I don't do that. And I remember very vividly, we were on tour. I think it was 2008, when there's a movie called Sunshine that Danny Boyle directed. And I saw it. We had a day off on tour, and there was, we all went to the movies, and I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that the guy that directed 28 Days Later was directing a space movie, and I was like, "Oh, I'm there. I'm gonna go see that."
Yeah.
And everybody else wanted to go see Hot Rod, and I was like, "I don't want to go see that." So me and the merch guy for the band that we were on tour with went and saw Sunshine, and I walked out of that with that score in my head, and I was like, "I want to do that. Like the thing that guy's doing. That's what I want to do." But it was one of those things that was just bouncing around in my head for years after that. I never took any concrete steps to make it happen. It was more just like, oh, that would be cool to do one day. And then one night, I was laying in bed watching something with my wife. I forget what it was, but I had made, a comment for the umpteenth time to her. I'm like, oh, the score for that thing is so good. Man, I'd love to do that one day. And, she's very wise woman, and she was like, why are you not doing this? Like, why are you not even trying to do this? Like, you keep talking about wanting to do it and you're just not doing it. And then I gave her all the all the reasons why. I was like, I don't know how. I don't know how to get started. I don't have connections. I can't read music. I wouldn't even know where to start. And she's like, well, why don't you just say that you're doing it and then see what happens from there? Like, just, it's kind of like, jumping off the cliff and then, sewing the parachute on the way down sort of thing. So I did. What I did is I posted a thing online saying that I had phrased it as I was opening my studio up to writing projects. So if anybody had a video game or an album or a film or anything they wanted me to write on, to contact me, and I was opening up my studio for that. And I only phrased it that way because I didn't feel comfortable saying that I was scoring film because I'd never done it before. But I was just hoping that a director or a producer would reach out and say, hey, would you want to write music for this thing? And I had a friend, luckily for me, he had moved out to LA to become an actor. And he decided he was going to direct a short film, and he hit me up and he was like, hey, I don't have any money for this thing. Like, it's a no budget thing, but would you want to write music for it? And I was like, absolutely. So he sent me that, and I ended up scoring that. And, from that point on, it was really a snowball of, one, just a ton of learning, having to learn an insane amount in a short period of time. But also it would be like, okay, a producer that I worked with on this thing was working on this other project, and he's like, oh, I know a composer that would be good for this, or an actor that was working with the director, and then was like, hey, like I worked, this guy did the last film that I did, like maybe blah blah blah. And it was kind of a snowball from there. That was back in, I started, I made that jump and posted that thing back in 2017. I'm still doing it. I'm working on I think this is it's my fifth or sixth feature currently. And then I have 2 lined up right after this one. So I'm just continuing to learn, thankfully continuing to get films, which is crazy. Like my whole thing is like, if I could score one movie, that would be awesome. And, I'm just still doing it. And, it's like with any, creative career endeavor, there's ups and downs, and, cause it's not as if it's, I enjoy doing it, but at the same time, it's, it's something that I want to be able to do as a career long after I'm able to play in the band. Cause I could see myself being elderly and doing this. So I'm, navigating the business of it and all that, which is, never fun, but, it's wild, man. Like I feel like I've kind of hit the life lottery multiple times, with the band, and then being able to do this, and, on top of family and everything else. So it's pretty rad.
And, just watching you guys, post, the Rebirth tour with Underoath reforming, and watching you guys shift from on the road. So it seemed like it used to be like 9 or 10 months a year sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is mental to me. I can't wrap my head around just what that must take out of you. Compared to now, watching you guys be much more specific, and I imagine that plays a lot into, the career with where the band's headed, interfacing with the career with the film scoring. It looks like it's in a place where, if you've got a few months at home away from touring with Underoath, you've got a film set up and vice versa. And, I just look at that and go, damn, that's the dream, man.
Yeah, it honestly, it really is, and the impetus of that was when we got back together, we recognized that there's a specific amount of touring that we can do where we enjoy it and we're having a good time. And we're like, we should only be touring that amount. Like once we get to the point where we're feeling like we have to do it, and we're feeling pushed, and we're feeling drained, we shouldn't be on the road at that point. We should, we're old enough to where, we have those we have that knowledge now after doing this for so long. So now when we are on the road, we are having a good time. We are enjoying each other's company. We're getting to do this thing. And, we found out that the more stuff we say no to, on the business end, the more stuff we say no to, the more it makes sense us touring less, because, we used to be afraid like, oh, well, if we say no to this thing, then, where's, we might not get something else around this time or whatever. But we found that that's not really the case. Like, scarcity is good sometimes. So, so, I mean, everybody has, for the most part, other things that they're doing. And, and when we're touring, or when we're writing, or when we're recording, we get to do those things, as opposed to just being trapped in this machine of a 2 or 3 year cycle of writing, touring, and recording. And, we're all dads, and we want to be at home with our kids, and, we want to be able to be with them and see them grow up. And, we don't want them to have a negative view of this band either. Which, I could see happening if we were just gone all the time. And yeah, it's multifaceted, but we're all really stoked with the balance that we have, because we have the band, we have the time there, and then we also have more time to do other things. So yeah.
And what's next with Underoath? Because you've got Let Go and Lifeline, 2 singles out at the moment. Have you been playing those live on the tour as well? I'm curious.
Yeah, on the last tour we were playing Lifeline on that tour. And it was in the middle of that tour that we decided that I don't think Lifeline or Let Go are going to be part of whatever we do next musically. We like those songs, but the stuff that we're now writing, though, those don't fit with what we're doing now. And we're actually, in a couple weeks, we are going up to a cabin in Georgia, and we're going to spend like a week and a half. We're going to set up a studio there, and we're going to just detach from everything, and we're just going to write music and grill food and sit in hot tub, and we're just going to be together in that environment for about a week and a half and see what comes out musically. Which I'm really excited for that. We haven't really talked publicly about us doing that, because it's more of we're not going to be like filming it. It's not going to be it's just going to be us. And, we're kind of on this, we're kind of in this moment of just wanting to write music together and not write an Underoath album together. If that makes sense. Because we're all realizing that, the music that is inspiring us is so varied, and we don't want to feel like we have to distill whatever that feeling is down to something that would generally be considered an Underoath song. So we have a stated idea that when we're not allowed to bring any ideas to the cabin, and we are only going to start ideas from scratch there, like kind of just, if you look at it from a hippy dippy way, let's see what that environment brings out, see what kind of creativity is there. And I'm stoked, honestly. Like I want to get some good time with the guys, and just, the place that we're renting is really cool. It's like in the mountains. It's got like a hot tub. It's got like this really big kitchen, and Aaron's like a great cook, so he's going to be cooking the whole time. And there's like a movie theater, and so it's just going to be us. I don't even know if there's phone service up there, and we're just going to be writing music and eating food and drinking and watching movies, and that's going to shape whatever the next Underoath, whether it's an album or an EP or whatever. It's probably going to be either multiple EPs or an album, but that's going to be what determines the direction of that. And based on what I've been talking to the guys about, where everybody's heads seem to be, this next thing might end up being a good bit different from other stuff that we've done, but who knows? We never really know what's going to happen until we get there. But I'm very excited for that time. So yeah,
it's super exciting. I can't wait to whatever the result of that is. I can't wait to hear it. And
yeah, me neither. Yeah. I'll be as surprised as you. And we even looked at it as, even if at the end of it we didn't have anything that worked, we would be able to know, okay, we know what isn't working. So now let's get to work on something that does. But I've got a good feeling about it. I'm excited. And we've got some touring plans for next year that I'm super excited about, that are coming together. And yeah, just continuing, which is wild considering, how long we've been doing it. The fact that we're still like excited and being able to do it is Yeah, it's crazy. It's not lost on me that it's weird that, we're all in our 40s and still, being able to enjoy our time together and tour and write music, and yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's unreal. And on the film front, what's up? What's coming up next? Any big projects that we should be looking out for?
I've got the film I'm working on now. It's like a kid's superhero movie. So it's
cool.
I don't know how that's going to be distributed, but that'll be coming out at some point. I don't even know if the title's going to stick, and then I have 2 horror movies I'm working on after that. And then, but I have to have those done. Like, the deadline's pretty tight on both of them. So I'll have 3 features done by the end of the year.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's going to be, I'm gearing up for some pretty late nights over the next month or two. But and then honestly, after that, I don't know, because of the writer's strike and the SAG strike. I may have a pretty, because both of the things I'm working on, they've already wrapped, so they're not, they don't need to film right now. But I might have a pretty big gap in film work next year, so we'll see. I don't know, man. It's it's ups and downs. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that whole it's all up in the air at the moment, isn't it? With the strikes going on. I guess
it's a good thing, though, I think.
Oh, for sure. And
yeah,
we can only just hope and wait for whatever the outcome is, that it's what we all need.
Yeah. I saw this meme the other day. The James Franco meme where it's like he's like in the noose and he's like, first time. You know that? Have you seen that?
Yeah,
meme?
I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one. It said WGA / SAG. The streamers are taking all of our money, and then it was like musicians first time. So I saw that. Yeah. I got a good kick out of that.
Yeah. And just to wrap up, we were talking horror before, and we mentioned Talk to Me. I'm curious, are there any other favorite horror movies, or even not horror movies, that you've seen this year that you think are awesome that you want to recommend?
Oh, hold on. I'm going to.
I know that's a dangerous question,
because I gotta. So I thought Barbie was amazing. I really really liked it. Let me see here. Hold on. Let me pull up what I've seen here. This is the worst. I know. Sorry.
No. All good. I sprung it on you.
Oh, no. It's all good. I'm
going to have to get your letterbox letter as well.
Oh, I am so bad at updating it. So yeah, I wouldn't even like say, hey, go look at this.
Okay.
Oh, the new Spider-Man movie was phenomenal. Like, I absolutely loved it. Have you seen it? The Across the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, I have seen it.
Yeah, I love that. I thought that was great. There's a couple movies I saw that I didn't really care for, but I don't like talking about stuff that I don't like too much because why? What's the point?
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. That's there's everybody. There's something for everybody, and if something's not for me, I just I shut up about it, and then I talk about the stuff I do love. I rewatched Speak No Evil a few weeks ago at the behest of some friends of mine because they wanted to. In their words, they wanted to watch something that was insane and messed up. And I told myself after I watched it the first time that I would never watch it again. And I was like, if you want something that'll like wreck you, here's this movie. And they're like, oh, let's watch that. And then literally after the movie was done, half of them were like, why'd you make us watch that? I watched that the other day. That's a hard recommend, but I thought Oppenheimer was pretty cool. I didn't love it, but I thought it was an above average movie for sure. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else that like blew me away. Nothing off the top of my head, other than Barbie and Talk to Me.
I had that experience with I don't know if you've seen Martyrs, the French Canadian horror film from like 2008.
Yes.
I'd been putting it off for so long because I'd heard it'll mess you up, like it'll just wreck you. And a local cinema was showing it as part of like an extreme cinema run. I was like, I guess now's as good a time as any.
Yeah.
And sort of like pumped myself up for it, and the stony cold silence like through the whole, and it was packed, the cinema, as the credits rolled. My goodness, that movie's grim, but like loved it. But it's the sort of thing you're like, how do you recommend it to someone?
Yeah. Have you seen Speak No Evil by chance?
I haven't. I've been meaning to. It's on my extensive list of movies to watch.
Well, I don't want to give anything away. The people who watched the movie with me were the audience that would be affected especially by that movie. I think Martyrs it's a lot different because it's more of a like you said, it's like extreme, like the gore and like just the stuff that you see, like that's the stuff that is like that's affecting. Like for Speak No Evil, it's more about like what happens and who it happens to, and just like it's more of an emotional wreck than it is like a there's a movie like, have you seen Inside?
Yes. The French one?
It's that's I would put Martyrs in that category where it's more so just like, oh man, look at that thing, But Speak No Evil is more just like it just hurts. Like you're just like, oh no, is that what's happening? Like, yeah, should be talking about that movie so much because I don't recommend anybody watch it blind. That's all. It's more of a that's all. Yeah.
I mean, that's all you had to say. Now I'm keen to see it. To me, that's a recommendation.
Exactly. What if, a bunch of people listen to this and go watch Speak No Evil and then get just like, well, Chris Monroe said it was awesome. Yeah. That guy's sick.
Yeah, I'll direct all the emails to you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. I'll wrap it up there. I don't want to keep you any longer. I mean, if people want to find you online, where can they find you? If they want to hit you up for anything, follow you, keep on track of what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm super easy to find. I'm at Chris Underoath on most social medias. So yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter mostly. At Chris Underoath. Super easy. Sweet.
And can't wait to whenever Underoath comes back to Australia, I'll be there. Can't wait.
We're talking about it now. So I'm hoping
Excellent.
that's part of our 2024 plans. We're working on it now. So I also can't wait. I'm stoked.
I'm happy to hear it. I lost a shoe at the Enmore in Sydney at the Rebirth tour. That was the last time I saw you guys, and I never found that shoe.
Apologies.
Again, so.
Hopefully you bought another one and you're not still shoeless.
I've got plenty of shoes now in the meantime. But
Perfect.
Chris, thanks so much for joining. I really, really appreciate your time. And thanks for listening. Feel free to get in touch with us if you've got any questions, follow-ups, and we'll see you guys next time. This is a prayer for the people who want to give up, who have been hurt beyond repair and cannot bear to see your face in anything. Find peace in letting go of the guilt that is in